So, Reverend James, thank you for being with us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. It's always great to be with you all. And I'd like to start our time or my time with you with a little time of meditation. That's all right. This is a very contemplative service, which is appropriate for modern day mystics. And I'd like to continue in that mode of experience for a time. So I invite you to find a comfortable position and begin to relax. May begin our time of meditation by being aware of our breathing and drawing our attention inward from outer concerns and conditions, drawing it inward. Feel our oneness with the earth and all living creatures that is manifested in our breathing of that same atmosphere of the earth, feeling our feet touching the ground, which supports all things on earth and is the earth. Feel this life flowing through us in a rhythm of giving and receiving. Breathe in and receive. We breathe out and give. We live in this awareness of the law and our consciousness that as we give, so shall we receive. We feel our bodies, these wonderful instruments for expression of the divine good. We seek to use these bodies to express divine qualities of life, light, love. And at the same time, we recognize that this body continually changes. It's part of the evolving expression of the infinite potentiality of the divine. Body is a wonderful instrument, but because it continually changes, it is not my unchanging self. It is not the I am of me. We're aware that in our bodies we feel emotions. These emotions are evolving of the soul within us. And yet, because they are ever changing, these emotions are not the unchanging self, the I am that I am. We are aware of the flow of thought, process of thinking and imagining. Like the body, like the soul, this field of thought is a wonderful gift, the expression of the infinite. Yet because it is continually changing, even this mind, this changing field of thought is not what I am, my unchanging self. So we rise higher to the idea, to the reality, to the experience of pure consciousness. Consciousness that experiences these ever-evolving aspects of the creative process, thoughts, the feelings, the body, the world. From this place of pure consciousness, we may direct the mind, thoughts, feelings, even the body and conditions. But in this place of pure consciousness, we turn our attention to the universal, infinite I am, the self. It transcends all our concepts and all these feelings and thoughts and body. Direct our attention to that which is beyond limitations of concepts and perceptions. We Let go. Let God be God in us. I invite you now to join me in this attitude of letting go, releasing for a time our consciousness of the ever evolving expression of the divine. We turn our attention, our consciousness to openness and receptivity to the experience of the divine as it is in itself. I let go and let God be God in me. I invite you to use this for a time as a silent mantra. I let go and let God be God in me. I let go and let God be God in me. We take this mantra inwardly. It's the reality of being. I let go and let God be God in me. So I invite you to join me, to join with each other in a time of silence, going into that silence with our mantra until we experience fully that presence. Let go and let God be God in me in silence. Now we are aware that in the silence and stillness we find peace, we find power, we find the light, love, and life that God is, that I am. We take this peace, this power, this life, light, and love with us into our awareness, yet once again, of the world around us, and into our experience, our thoughts and feelings, perceptions, the body. We bring this awareness that all this is in God the good, and God the good is in all this. And so we are grateful. And so it is. Amen. Now we bring our attention back to the experience that we share with each other. It's a community of mystics. So I'm glad to see all of you here. I wasn't sure with the title of the talk this week that anyone would show up, except, well, I knew Maya would and some of the others, but why is there something rather than nothing seems like a rather odd title, don't you think? It's probably not the usual sort of thing that we hear in a Sunday service. The title was suggested to me by a philosopher named Martin Heidegger. Heidegger proposed that the most important philosophical question is, why is there something rather than nothing? So this is actually a metaphysical question. It assumes that an absolute void or nothingness is just as possible as a universe with somethings in it, with somethingness. Logically, that would be true, right? If we think about it, there's equal possibilities, presumably. But it's a metaphysical question. So it's like this. When I ask someone, why did you do that? I'm not looking for knowing how they did it. Word why in the question suggests that we want reasons for what, reasons that the person would have for doing something. Why is a metaphysical question. When we ask the question, why is there something rather than nothing, we're asking for reasons for existence rather than descriptions of existence. Physics and science describe existence, sort of describe what is, but metaphysics seeks a kind of justification for existence, the underlying sort of rationale, if you will, if there is one. So, to restate the metaphysical question, what is the reason that there happens to be something in the universe rather than there happening to be nothing at all? And of course, some would answer this rather facilely, right? Some would say things such as, well, God created the universe to express his goodness and power. Those types of answers assume that God is a supreme person and that we can somehow read that supreme person's mind, that we can understand God's motives in a way that we can understand human motives. Some scientists and philosophers seem simply satisfied to say, well, the universe just exists. There is no answer to why it exists. And some philosophers and theologians have tried to use logic to demonstrate the impossibility of nothingness. So such arguments generally amount to something like nothing means non existence, therefore, the existence of nothing is logically contradictory. So that's kind of an answer is given, and logically, there's nothing wrong with it logically in terms of the rules of logic or anything like that. But the mystic teachings propose an answer that is radically different from those other attempts to find an answer or to posit an answer. The mystic answer to the question is suggested by what mystics have to say about their experience of God and the nature of nothingness. So, for one example, I'm going to look at the famous mystic Meister Eckhart, because Meister Eckhart had a lot to say about nothing. Eckhart von Hachheim was born in Germany near the city of Gaither. At the age of 15, he chose to enter the Dominican order in nearby Erfurt, Germany. He studied theology in Paris at one of the most prestigious universities of the time. And there, Eckhart earned a master's degree, and that's why he's known as Meister Eckhart. Meister simply being master. So this master's degree was a license for him to teach theology and philosophy. During his life, Meister Eckhart was very active inwardly and outwardly. He studied Greek philosophy, the works of various mystics, including Dionysius, Plotinus, and others, as well as the leading Christian, Jewish, and Muslim theologians, sort of broad knowledge of the world of thought. But he also had administrative authority over 47 regional monasteries, sort of very active sort of life of administration. He established 3 new convents while continuing his work as a scholar and a teacher. Beyond that, he preached to monastics and lay people using the local German vernacular, which was unusual at the time since most preaching was done in Latin, which, of course, people in Germany didn't understand. Well, he was an exceptionally, or most of them didn't. Eckhart was an exceptionally effective and successful preacher, as well as an accomplished scholar. Now, later in life, Eckhart was accused of heresy by some of his fellow Dominicans in that order. In 1327, the Pope set up a commission to examine the alleged heresies of Eckhart. The commission found or stated 28 propositions that they deemed heretical in his writings. However, before official judgment could be made by the Pope and cardinals, Eckhart had the good sense to make his transition. Now, 2 months later, the Pope pronounced that the 28 propositions were indeed heretical. However, the Pope did not pronounce officially that Eckhart was a heretic. He only pronounced that Eckhart had expressed heretical positions. Now, one might expect such a figure to disappear from history. Nevertheless, Eckhart's works continued to be influential through the ages, perhaps more now than ever before. His work has influenced important modern thinkers such as Heidegger, whom I mentioned earlier with that question, but also Hegel and Schopenhauer. His works influenced the great comparative religion scholar Rudolf Otto. They influenced the Zen scholar D.T. Suzuki, who basically introduced Zen to the West. And he influenced another person he's influenced in modern times is Matthew Fox, who's an Anglican priest, formerly a Catholic priest, a theologian, and a best-selling author. So people today more people today have probably heard of Meister Eckhart than any other time in history. Interesting. Well, among other things, Meister Eckhart sought mystical meaning in the scriptures. He tried to show how metaphysical truths are hidden beneath the literal sense, much as we do in unity. Now, Meister Eckhart once gave a sermon on a passage from Acts 9, verse 8, which is a simple passage which says, this is about Paul, who's later known as Paul. Saul arose from the ground, and when his eyes were opened, he could see nothing. Eckhart's interpretation of this is very mystical and interesting. He wrote, I think this text has a fourfold sense. One is that when he rose up from the ground with open eyes, he saw nothing, and the nothing was God. For when he saw God, he calls that nothing. The second, when he got up, he saw nothing but God. The third, in all things, he saw nothing but God. In all things, he saw nothing but God. Fourth, when he saw God, he saw all things as nothing. Eckhart's interpretation reflects his own personal mystical experience. In his interpretation of the experience of seeing God, Eckhart expressed four ideas about nothing. God is nothing, one. Two, when we see God, we see nothing. Three, when we see God, there's nothing but God in all things we see. And four, when we see God, we see all things as nothing. Think of all this nothingness as meaningless is really to miss Eckhart's point. There is a reality that transcends our perceptions of the somethings in the universe. There is a reality that transcends all of our concepts, even our concepts of God, perhaps especially our concepts of God. That transcendent reality is nothing just because it transcends all our perceptions and concepts of some things. Now, in the same sermon, Eckhart went on to explain a bit more. He said, God is a nothing and God is a something. What is something is also nothing. So now he's getting very paradoxical, like a Zen master, right? You understand why he'd appeal to the Zen teacher Suzuki. He goes on and he says, anything you see or anything that comes within your ken that is not God, just because, anything you see or anything that comes within your ken that is not God, just because God is neither this nor that. Whoever says God is here or there, do not believe him. This idea of omnipresence that transcends presence, that transcends things. Here's a passage in which Eckhart describes one of his mystical experiences. He describes it in the third person, as Paul in his letters described his mystical experiences in third person. So Eckhart writes, it appeared to a man as in a dream. It was a waking dream, that he became pregnant with nothing, like a woman with child. And in that nothing, God was born. He was the fruit of nothing. God was born in the nothing. Now, this is a theme that Eckhart expresses in various ways in his writings, that we must, in effect, become nothing in order to have God born in us. That God may be all in all, as Paul had put it. So for Meister Eckhart, God was simultaneously nothing, something, and creator of the universe. This implies that nothing and something were or are coexistent somehow. It suggests that the something came from the nothing. In other words, the reason that there is something rather than nothing is that nothing creates or gives birth to something. Now, Eckhart was not the only mystic who talked in this way, who talked about nothingness and infinite somethingness as somehow related, as ways of talking about the ultimate or ways to talk about God. The divine nothingness spoken of by Eckhart echoes through the ages, before and after, in the writings of other mystics about the experience of divine union or ultimate reality. Think for a moment of the Buddhist word for this experience of ultimate bliss and reality, the word nirvana, which literally means extinction or emptiness. Sufis call the mystical experience fana in Arabic, which means annihilation of self. So all that remains in the extinction or annihilation of our human sense of self, all that remains in the annihilation of that human sense of self is the one God self. We talked about what I discussed when I talked about what is your real self? What are you really? There's a passage from a 13th century Kabbalah teacher, Rabbi Joseph uh, Gekatilla. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right. He said he was a rabbi and a teacher of the Kabbalah. He wrote this: the depth of primordial being is called boundless. Because of its concealment from all creatures above and below, it is also called nothingness. No one can understand anything about it except the belief that it exists. Its existence cannot be grasped by anyone other than it. Therefore, its name is I am becoming. So notice this Kabbalah teacher uses again that same word or that same idea of nothingness, nothingness as God. The Taoist philosophy asserted that the Tao, the ultimate reality and source of the universe, was empty. So we read in the Tao Te Ching, the Tao is empty, like a bowl. It may be used, but its capacity is never exhausted. It's empty, but it's never exhausted. All things in the world come from being, and being comes from non-being. This isn't the way we ordinarily think about things. This is the way mystics understand the universe from their experience. Taoists not only believed in something from nothing, they believed that emptiness and space continue to inhabit the world of somethings. They saw that space or emptiness is necessary to make things useful, to make the world habitable. And so we find this passage also in the Tao Te Ching. It sort of explains it. 30 spokes are united around the hub to make a wheel, but it is on the non-being, it's on its non-being that the utility of the carriage depends. In other words, that empty spot in the wheel through which the hub goes. Again, clay is molded to form a utensil, a bowl or a vase, but it is on its non-being that the utility of the utensil depends, that the utility, the usefulness of it. Again, doors and windows are cut out to make a room, but it is on its non-being that the utility of the room depends, right? If the room is completely filled up with stuff, you can't use it, right? Therefore, it goes on, turn being into advantage and turn non-being into utility. So this interaction or experience of somethingness and nothingness is what the Taoists get at. The everyday ordinary point of view is just one mode of experience, one way of experiencing existence. Everyday consciousness is filled with anxieties and desires, hopes and fears, pleasures and pains, perceptions, surprises, and boredom. The mystic seeks to be empty of all these things, empty of desires, of anxieties, of hopes and fears, and seeks detachment from pleasures and pains, surprises and boredom. And in that emptiness, the mystic finds union with the divine. Meister Eckhart had a deep inward life, as most mystics do, as all mystics do, I suppose, had a deep inward life sitting in stillness and silence, emptying his consciousness to receive the experience of God. He emphasized the mystic virtues of detachment and what he called letting go-ness. Letting go-ness. He advocated these virtues as part of a way to let God be God in us. He advocated emptying ourselves of personal interests, to be more concerned with others. His emphasis was on allowing God to work through us rather than struggling to force ourselves or conform our will to God's will, to simply allow. The mystic knows that inner peace is a state of unconsciousness of human selfhood, unconsciousness of human selfhood, a state of stillness and silence. That state is union with ultimate reality, which is not a thing, but rather pure consciousness of emptiness, but also oneness, intuitive knowingness, and bliss. Attaining this state, if only for a few moments, gives the power to attain a state of serenity in the midst of all changing conditions of active life. One who develops his mystic consciousness to some degree becomes a calming and charismatic presence in the midst of world turmoil. The mystic's words, written hundreds or thousands of years ago, can still bring comfort, love, and light in our own times. Infinite mind is obviously not finite. It is not observable, but it is itself observer of all. Infinite mind is not a person. Persons are finite and live in societies capable of imposing responsibilities and granting rights. There is no power capable of granting rights to or imposing responsibilities on the infinite. Infinite mind is not something like a personal soul that imagines, believes, speaks, and has understanding. Infinite mind is not a thing or person in any of the common meanings of things and persons. Infinite mind must be pure, unified consciousness of all. Infinite mind must eternally contain knowledge of all possible worlds. Those possible worlds include the universe we experience and our individual experiences of that universe. So the infinite mind contains our experience. It contains the possibility of no worlds, of nothingness. Why is there nothing rather than something? It contains that possibility. Infinite knowing must include what it is to be me, what it is to be you, everyone and everything, all at once. It has no need to imagine because it contains already all possible imaginings. It does not think, yet contains all thoughts. It does not understand, but rather is understanding itself. It does not love, but rather is love itself. Eckhart connected the goal of emptying oneself with the ancient Aristotelian idea that nature abhors a vacuum. I'm sure you've heard that idea. He wrote, "You should know God cannot leave anything void or nullified or unfulfilled." I'm sorry, go back. You should know God cannot leave anything void or unfilled. God and nature cannot endure that anything should be empty or void. And so, even if you think you can't feel him and are wholly empty of him, that is not the case. To experience union with this divine nothing, the inspiring mystic must inwardly become nothing and outwardly attached to nothing. How can this be done? Through openness and receptivity. We attain the divine emptiness by mentally and emotionally letting go, by letting go of thoughts about ourselves and conditions in the perceptible world, by letting go of worry about results and the future. We may connect with the peace that surpasses all understanding, by frequently sitting in stillness and silence, by becoming nothing. The mystic is a pure channel for the pure bliss, limitless love, the all encompassing wisdom of the infinite one. In this way, something wonderful comes from nothingness, from nothingness. I'm going to take a moment to just share one other little perspective from scientific point of view. We often hear that everything is energy. But according to scientists, and this is from Stephen Hawking, among others, in a universe that is approximately uniform, there is zero energy because what he calls positive energy is negated by an equal amount of negative energy, or which is gravity. So there's energy outward, but there's energy inward that cancels things out. And so there's a total of zero energy. This led the physicist Alan Guth to say, "It is said that there's no such thing as a free lunch, but the universe is the ultimate free lunch." Now, as you can see by now, I could go on talking forever about nothing, but I won't. I close with this final thought from Meister Eckhart: let go and let God be God in you. And that concludes my discussion of why there's something rather than nothing.
Thank you. And I am grateful that we recorded successfully your talk.